didn't know
Good
that.
evening and welcome to the Malden Zone. I'm your host this evening, Ed Lucey, and my guest to ring in the new year is Bill Thomson, well-known resident here in Malden, community activist, I think is the terminology.
I try not to be too active. Are you kidding me? So
Bill's keeping a low profile lately. That's why he said
I'm
that.
laying low, yeah. So.
We have a show of information, opinions, and things I hope of interest to the listening audience. We also have a call-in phone number, 781-397-8286. So if you have a reason to agree or disagree with us, or you have an idea that you think we should talk about, please take the time to ring us. And the number again is 781-397-8286. Well, thanks for stopping by, Bill. I usually when January rolls around, and I've done this show now for I think for the better part of 15 years, we kind of recap what happened over the previous year.
You've been doing this show for 15
Well,
years?
it seems that way, yeah. I mean, I'm on work release now, so I should be.
15 years, really? No.
Yeah, when you're doing community service, they only count the actual time.
I would think by now you'd have a couple highlight reels, and you could just, you could take the evening off and just show the highlights.
Well, when they take the evening off, they do reruns of Joe Panadosi show. So. But anyway, I was going to talk tonight, if you kind of agree for talk about Malden this past year. We had a whole bunch of events that occur every year, some positive, some negative, and things that affects the community as a whole. Other times it's maybe impact individuals. So I thought if you would share with me this evening some of the events that have happened and some of the things that have occurred during the year that have made 2012, as far as Malden goes, the year in review.
Okay.
And I think, maybe to start off with, there's a new administration, as we all are aware.
Yeah.
And it took office last January, and the former mayor who left office and went over to Winchester as a town manager, had been in office 16 years.
Wow.
And sometimes when you
longer than you've had this show, huh?
Well, he's the reason I got the show. I used to have his job. But anyway, the new mayor came in.
That's too bad, Ed, because you got paid back then for that, and now you do it for nothing.
Although I probably was underpaid even then. But anyway, that's another story. I was making a lot less money as mayor than currently being paid. But anyway, that's the way it goes.
Well, now the salary's gone way up.
Oh,
right,
it certainly has.
Yeah. I don't know what the current salary range is for the mayor, but it's over 100,000. It
is. I think it's close to 120 when you count the stipends he gets from the school committee.
Oh, you get a stipend from the. Yeah, that's right, because that's a paying committee now. And,
it is. Yeah. Although I didn't agree with it, I thought the mayor's should have been part of his job responsibility when they changed the charter. But again, that's not the way they ended up doing it, and so I believe it's $7,000.
Oh, all right. Well, that's not much, but
well,
as compared to his full salary. But
that's true, and yet if you're going to be part of the on the board as required by the charter, you're going to be there anyway. And on the other hand, maybe you think a little bit more about that when you're inching towards retirement age, and you add another $7,000 on for the pension. So, and it seems
suffice it to say, you didn't make anywhere near those numbers.
No, about half of that. Yeah.
Oh,
but
okay.
we have a new administration, and I kind of compare in some ways maybe even Boston, which is far more of a metropolitan than Malden. But Mayor Menino has some recent health issues, but he's been in as long or longer than that. And at the same time,
I look at him kind of like a Fidel Castro. I mean, like he's had these health problems, but they've been trying to keep him alive and well.
Yeah.
And they keep coming blurbs out of his office to make it seem like he's still in control and still actively managing.
Well, I think he was feeding the homeless the other day. I don't know how long he did that. And then he was greeting little kids before that, sitting in the cab of the car, so he wasn't getting out moving around. But with Mayor Menino, the thing that's kind of interesting, between being in the hospital and being in rehab, I think now, by the time he got out of the facility, it was at least 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And most people, when they're in a hospital environment or they have to go to rehab because of the efforts made to get you back and out among them again,
Oh yeah.
you lose weight. He looks like to me he gained weight. So and he
Oh,
was
yeah.
he was no lightweight before.
And somebody I was watching the news, and somebody visited him in the hospital, and he was sitting on the edge of his bed, and they were interviewing him, and he was just barely could talk.
Well, yeah.
I mean, now worse than ever. Worse than normal.
Than before. Yeah. Well, anyway, but he's not bothered. But we have a new administration. Came in January, high energy level, and every time you pick up a newspaper, whether it was the weekly paper or the Malden newspaper, and of course, I guess the mayor's office now has they don't call him an official photographer, but he's got a personnel staff who clicks pictures wherever he goes. And so maybe that's the reason there was many pictures of him as appear to be on a constant basis. But I think it's more because Gary is new, he's energetic, he's enthused for the position. And
now, do we have a PowerPoint slide that can support this? Do you have like a graph that shows how many pictures were taken
no.
annually over the years on mayors and things like that?
No, but sometimes mayors, when there's things aren't going their way, they're not available at all as a photo shoot or.
Well, things must be going well then, because he's very visible.
Well, it's the honeymoon period. You know, you're new. Obviously, it's unlikely to continue to stay that way. Definitely.
So this year would not be. I mean, what's the length of a honeymoon period? Usually a year, right?
Sometimes less.
Well, okay.
But so far, I would say it's an extended honeymoon. But coming up, all the labor contracts have expired,
right.
So they're in negotiations, or they will be soon for that. The state has indicated that the financial outlook isn't as good as it has been, and it hasn't been that great. But it's even not going to be as good this coming year. And since communities, particularly communities like Malden, that really depend on local aid to kind of do the things that you have to do for your
Now,
citizens.
let me ask you a question on that, because I know the state tries to predict throughout the year what the tax receipts are going to be, right? Do local communities such as Malden, do they have someone here that's also got their crystal ball out that's, you know, trying to predict what kind of money they'll be getting in from the state on a monthly basis or something? Well,
the format, I think, generally is in January the governor presents his budget.
Okay.
And the Senate and the House take the budget and throw it in the wastebasket. And then they put their own together. And ultimately what happens is through compromise and adjustments, they then are able to come into some way to spend all the money can get, if they hopefully not spend more than they get coming in. What's been done in recent years, in fairness to the communities, is to give them a tentative figure early in the year.
Okay.
And that's based on some hypothetical and some premises that may or may not.
Well, everybody's budget, even the state and the city, is what would you call it? June to.
It's July 1st to June.
July to June.
Right.
So, when you say early on, so they
February.
Like in February they give the number to the cities and
tentative
towns?
Number, yeah.
Tentative number.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because the cities really and the towns have their town meeting in the spring, and so they obviously have to be in a position to make a calculation as to what the state's going to provide them, and so cities drag it out probably to May, sometimes even to June. Yeah. Before they finalize their own budget, but at that point they geared up towards July.
But that
1st.
Tentative number pretty much stays fairly.
Yeah, well, but sometimes happens. I think if you look at the history, if you're trying to be prudent, what you do is you be conservative, and then sometimes some years.
Well, who's being conservative, the state or the city?
The state.
Oh, okay.
Well, maybe more like the speakers and the Ways and Means chairperson. You know, because they. You don't want to be in a situation where the money is there as you promised the community. You better be a little bit lower, then you find out you get extra money, then you give them a little bit extra. And I think that happened this past year. The cities and towns
got some money.
Got a little bit more money. And you know, but the receipts have been supposedly not coming in to the level that they anticipated,
right.
and Christmas wasn't as good this year supposedly as they forecasted nationally.
Right.
So that that has an effect, a domino effect at each level of government, because if you have less sales in the stores, you have less sales tax, and that's a big source of revenue. So so that's where we're at. So anyway, but the administration itself, I think, is even if people, some didn't support them, I think so far the cities looks cleaner. They're certainly doing the streets more often. Which
oh,
is
you think so?
Absolutely, yeah. I walk as many days a week as I am able to, and I can see the difference. The only ones that don't seem to, a few streets, Holyoke Street, by the way, we were talking about that before. Mm-hmm. That must be the worst street in the city, in terms of the potholes and in the.
You know the city, the
leaves and things on the street.
Oh, that.
Yeah, and some of it, you can't be totally critical of the DPW people, because what happens is when you're allowed to park on the street, and the sweeper comes along, if there's a car there, which is legal, but they tell you certain days of the month we clean.
Yeah.
You're supposed to keep the streets bare of cars, and sometimes you have visitors, sometimes people forget. And when they're not going around aggressively giving tickets out, people tend to leave the cars in the street. So they sometimes have to work around those cars when you do the sweeping. And if you're not passing out tickets, no one knows the fact that that was the day you were supposed to have moved your car. And the result is that I don't think the city's been doing the ticketing as much as they should. I know other people complain, to me personally, about people even up off of Salem Street, someone will come along, park the car there, walk to the tee.
Yeah, we always have that. And I suspect there's people parking, well, I live on Ferry Street. I suspect that people park on the Ferry Street during the day and just get on the bus.
Yeah.
I mean, why wouldn't they?
Yeah.
And I know that maybe I haven't really. How did that? We were going to have a citywide sticker or residency.
It's still under study. I think that it'll probably fly. I think it's going to.
I don't really fully understand how that would work, but.
Well, the pluses and the minuses. They got a lot of resistance from some residents because of the cost. There's always an issue of cost. So then they offered out to the community, those people who had currently registered garage vehicles in Malden would get a sticker with no charge.
Okay.
Then when you replace your car, you'd have to pay.
Oh.
So any of the people, and I think there's a fair number of cars in this community that I even my own name, but I see Maine cars and sometimes other cars in the people live there.
Yeah.
But it's cheaper to have the car registered sometimes in another community, especially a small town, even if it's in Massachusetts. So those people are going to have to pay, and I think there's a fair number of those situations in the high-rise or the apartment complexes. So the idea is what it'll do is it'll keep the control of who's actually in the community, and the other thing is you'll have to start paying excise tax to Malden, because the communities where your car is garaged. On paper is where it gets the money from the excise tax. So even if you lived here in Malden with your garage, the car on paper in Andover or
don't say Marshfield.
I won't say Marshfield. No. But speaking of Marshfield, I saw a Hemrock. Humrock, is it? In
Humrock, yes.
Humrock, yeah.
Yes.
They had the Elm Street Brownies.
Hemorrhoid Rock.
Yeah. They were running into the water yesterday. Yesterday
Yesterday
a whole bunch of people.
Well, Southie, they have their that's a big thing. Would you do that? I mean, I think I'd have a heart attack if I went in the water. Well, it's probably no different than our temperature in the summertime. Right?
If you listen to George Costanza and Steinfeld, the shrinkage in the pool was tough. But anyway, the other thing is with the administration, it just seems to me I haven't seen.
There's only two shows that I know have gotten away with that comment. Seinfeld and Ed Lucey. Malden Zone.
No, they might not get. I might not get through to the rerun time on Saturday and Sunday. But I haven't heard too many critical comments about the administration. Although I think he's got an odd mix of people in his office, but that's his choice. And but he's going to
tell me about that now. An odd mix.
Well, you'll have to look on the patch of some of those other ones. Well, like I say, he's got a photographer who.
Well, why in general do you feel it's an odd mix?
Well,
I mean, let's not get into any specifics.
Well, I don't think he had a lot of experienced people when he put his staff
really?
together. Very little experience. But sometimes people are quick learners. In other instances, if they're efficient at what they do, then that'll take care of itself in time. But most times when you look around at other communities when they have whether it's a new mayor coming in or someone who's been in office, and maybe make some changes. But the particularly new ones, they bring along people who have some previous background in government, whether they're former city officials or at the state level or whatever.
So we don't have a lot of people in Malden city government that have a lot of experience?
It doesn't appear that at the mayor's office. Yeah.
At the mayor's office. But, now, how many people are actively, like as far as employees? I don't know any idea. How many people work in the mayor's office?
Well, there's more
like
than
10 or 15? Or?
Well, no, not 15. I'm not quite sure how many, but I think the
we have a photographer.
Yeah. You won't take my picture probably at the next time I'm on an event. But anyway,
I don't know. I saw your picture on the holiday parade. You were front and center, along with me.
Oh yeah.
That's
that's right. Well, that was
well worth it. That photographer was making us money.
I missed that issue. I guess you must have bought them all. But
yep.
there are going to be some changes coming up in the government aside from all that. One of which is I believe the police chief is mandatory retirement in February, so there's going to be a new police chief.
Oh, really?
And my understanding is the fire chief is retiring as well. And
wow.
so now you're going to have two new people coming in, whether as it often happens, it usually does happen, they bring them in through the department.
Okay.
But again, that's sometimes see change that'll happen within those departments. And,
so, what's your crystal ball on this? Is this good for the community, or?
Well, change sometimes good. I think I think the example was even at the mayor's office. I think aside from any of the personalities involved, the last couple of years of Richard's administration, it was like staying at the dance too long, and there wasn't much going on. And whatever he was doing, he did early on, and his focus was more brick and mortar with buildings. And I think Gary's is more a humanized kind of approach to government, and therefore you get more interaction with the community because he's around a lot. That's his nature, and that's the way he operated as a city council in Ward 1. Now he just, instead of doing it for one ward, he's doing it for the city. So.
Well, you have to admit, Gary, and to his credit, I guess, but he's also, you say there's maybe a lack of experience in the mayor's office, but there's probably younger people there too.
Very definitely. Yeah.
So, that's kind of a characteristic. He's a younger guy, and he surrounds himself with people that he probably feels comfortable with. And my observation would be, in general, they appear to be a little bit younger than past administrations, collectively.
Yeah.
And then also, because he's a younger guy, and along with his office, they appear to be embracing technology much more than previous administrations.
That's true too, and that in it may be what will come out of that is there may be some criticism directed at the city for that because even though that's the nature of the way life exists today, not only in the business world but even in every level with young people and with schools and communicating with each other. There still is an element or a group of citizens at the different regions are not electronically tuned in, and therefore, unless you get involved in kind of a approach to reaching out to the various city agencies, you're going to find out that you're left on the sideline because you don't know what's going on, and they don't know you because you're not in the electronic world like me.
Is this that complaining? Well, I think you do pretty good. You do email and stuff, right?
I play solitaire,
I'm not sure if you're up to Facebook speed and all that, but Twitter.
No, I'm on Computer 101.
Fran was just telling us, what do we have another show on this where we're doing Twitter?
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
Tweets?
I missed that one. But by the way, there's also I mentioned the retirement of the police chief and the fire chief. There is also coming up in January. A lieutenant on the fire department's retiring, Henry Ferrick.
Oh, right.
And he's not maybe the only one going to leave this year, but Henry's been on the department over 36 years.
Right.
And has never missed a day.
Wow.
He has not utilized a sick leave in all the years that he's been on the department. So that's
How does he get paid for his sick days?
Well, I asked him. You do.
Whoa.
But nowhere near what you would get if you worked. No, he's lieutenant, and there is some compensation. I forget now how much. They used to pay $10 a day with a cap.
Wow.
I think, and they maybe bumped it up. I try to bump it up.
He's going to be a very rich man. 36 years of how many sick days you get a year?
15, I think.
Oi.
But I think they make cap.
Well, they earned it. Hey, I couldn't go 36 years without taking a sick day. I know that. Very few people could. That's
well, maybe sometimes maybe you had maybe someone covered a shift for you. It's like someone Lou Gehrig or somebody else playing 2,000 games and never missing a day. They can maybe have you pinch hit one day when you're under the weather, or you go in for one inning and then you come out. But technically,
so are you questioning it some days?
No.
He wasn't up to speed, and maybe he should have taken a sick day.
No. I don't. No, I'm not saying that at all. If anything, it's an enviable record, and his target date, I believe, is the 25th of January. But unless he gets sick, although I talked to him on the phone the other day, he had a head cold, so maybe he was going to. He'll give up the.
Maybe he's like, well, if I'm sick, I just wouldn't be at work, to tell you the truth.
Pass it around?
Maybe you just suck it up and go to work, because to stay home is even worse,
So anyway, so that's one of the new administration, and I think we have the Field of Dreams, which is supposedly...
Yeah, now that keeps inching forward, and I'm not quite sure what the current status is. Now, I saw a round of pictures and backslapping just a couple of weeks ago, so is there anything definite? Well,
I had my reservations, and I've made comments over the last couple of years about it, because, sometimes you wonder how credible is it, because... first of all, it's an independent league. It's not a team. It's not affiliated with any major league team.
Yeah.
And usually the people that are involved in that sort of a situation are has-beens or never were. These are people that aren't really major league caliber players. Once in a while, sometimes people get overlooked, and they do make the transition from independent league to and they may have been in the professional status and been, let's say, let go by a team, and now they go back in hopes that they'll be noticed and get another chance. But Malden has this has been in the works for several years. There's been some bumps along the way, but the focus was to get the National Grid to either sell or lease the property, which is
well, apparently they're going to lease the property.
Yeah, for 99 years, I think.
99 years?
I think so.
Whoa. And, but the thing that I don't like about this particular agreement, I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that if the stadium doesn't work out in the private, whoever's the investors are, the city's holding the bag on the lease?
I've heard that. I don't know all the details, and that obviously would be a serious concern.
We don't like holding the bag.
Yeah, well, they might be guaranteeing the notes or the rents or whatever. And you're right. It's and there are any number of those situations. They've had teams in Lynn, they've had teams in Brockton, they've had teams in Lowell, but the Lowell Spinners are there and done well.
Yeah.
Of course, Pawtucket is affiliated with the Red Sox. They've done well, but Brockton struggled. And some of these independent league teams haven't done that well. There was a team in Worcester this year, and towards the end of the season, their attendance had gone way down. In fact, they had an example of a has-been. They brought in Jose Canseco. He played for them for about 2 weeks. He's 48 years old, and obviously they brought him on. He likes the limelight, and they maybe thought he'd be a draw for attendance purposes, but I think he ended up, age caught up with him. He broke down physically, and then there was a question of...
Hasn't he considered steroid use?
Well, he admits he still does that. Yeah, that's not considered. He's the advocate. I think he's selling it on the street corner.
We need senior steroids. Yeah. That's what we need.
But we not only have a baseball field of dreams potential, which some people have some doubts about it, but like I say, that's a key issue, and is that there's a semi-pro football team supposedly coming on board too.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's being put together. I saw recently in the paper. It's perhaps a year away from formally setting up a schedule. But Bill Spadafora, a well-known local family man and former city councilor, is spearheading it here in Malden, and they had a tryout recently, and they've got several, Max Lane and among others who played for the Patriots or supposedly or the coaching staff, and they claim they'll be putting the team together for the not this year, but in 2014. But it'll be interesting. So that'll really put Malden on the map. But we'll have to see if that actually happens. And another big item this year was the teen center in Malden, one Salem Street, which is on the corner opposite the high school, and they formally opened last week.
Last week was the official?
Yeah, they had a ribbon cutting prior to that, but they had an open house for the people.
Yeah, the holiday parade, we had that ribbon cutting, right? Yeah, was that the ribbon cutting ceremony?
No, that was
just an open house?
Yes, that was an open house when they had the parade, and the attendance levels have been extremely high. They're hopeful of using that location not only for the age group, which would be high school age kids here at the Malden High, but also the Mystic Valley Charter School and Mormon Catholic, and for that matter Pope John. But obviously from a practical point of view, the high school's right there in one corner, they're on the other corner. Yeah. But the committee that's put together has done an extremely competent job. They did some great fundraising, got some serious donations, and it's become very viable and credible. And as far as I know, my son, who, as a city councilor, has been very involved, and along with.
Oh yeah, no, he's been spearheading this whole thing, huh?
Yeah, with a lot of other people, but and I know his wife has been helpful as well. The attendance has been extremely good.
Oh, that's good.
It was obviously tailed off this past week when school was closed, but they're looking to get a continuous flow of kids that go there in the afternoon. It's going to be like a 2 to 9 opening, and that way you can go. They have computers there, and they have other kinds of things you can utilize.
Right. Now I want to get out. I had an idea for that place a long time ago, and that was for the teen center.
Yeah.
But to take part of the storefront, you know how that wraps around, and you've got those wide windows,
yeah, and
then you've got that door. They could make a storefront there and actually sell items. It wouldn't take a lot of square footage because you just would have the window and maybe a small section. So why don't they incorporate that and get some enterprise going in there for the teens to be involved in enterprise?
I don't know if they're big enough.
What do you mean they're not big enough?
Areas they could set aside enough space there to do that.
Oh, sure they could.
Okay,
sure
well,
they could. There's a lot of space in that particular.
Now, if anybody's listening as well with the teen center, you can call right now 781-397-8286, or you can email Bill Thomson at where? What's your email address, Bill?
zzz at something.com.
Well, you saw your title. You're the community activist. That's a great idea.
I told you I wasn't all that active anymore. Yeah. So, I'm taking the night off.
By the way, our own congressman there, Congressman Markey, that's, I think,
he lives in Malden. Hey,
he's here in spirit if he's not here in person. But he's announced he's going to run for senator.
Yeah.
And they seem to have cleared the field for him.
Well, they tried to.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, I think as it gets more definite, I'm sure you're going to get other people in the race.
You think so?
Wow.
Who?
Well, I mean, it's going to be a shortened race, right?
Yeah, just like the time Brown won the last time.
So if you ever had any inclination to be a senator, I would think it would be a great opportunity because it would be on the cheap. You'd only have to run in a small window versus what we just went through with the Warren race in Scott Brown, where they spent, what, did they set records?
They did.
Yeah. They spent millions of dollars.
Multi-million.
I'm seriously, the next time you get a full election cycle up and somebody running earnestly, they're going to think twice about the kind of money that's going to have to be spent. Yeah.
Well, except because it has a short window, and obviously, number one, it's premised on Senator Kerry resigning to accept the Secretary of State's position, and they don't expect or anticipate that his confirmation hearing is going to be much of a difficulty. But then under the law, you have to have within a certain number of days you have a temporary replacement, and then you have another election. And the Democrats did that to themselves years ago when they were trying to run around the Republican governor who was going to be, doing a vacancy. But so sometimes when you make a change for one time instant, it ends up you defeat the purpose of the advantage at a later date. But anyway, I think what's kind of interesting, when I was asked about that a couple of weeks ago, I said, no, he's not going to run because he got all those years in the House, and you're giving up a lot. But then when you think about it, and when he announced he was going to run, and they kind of cut out Capuano, he's kind of interested. He's indicated he's interested.
Oh, really?
But he'd rather be governor.
Oh.
And Brown, who probably going to run, would rather be governor.
Really?
Yeah.
Scott Brown would?
Yeah, but he's going to be probably forced to run because he's the man that they think they could get the seat. But in Congressman Markey's thing, I said, gee, all those years in the House, and then you're going to go over to the Senate. But because he's been there that long, and he has all that seniority, but you're a minority in the Senate, in the Congress. So therefore, the Republicans chair all the committees, and they're the ones that really directed.
I think all you got to do is look at the fiscal cliff issue that we just went through. That you'd much rather be in the Senate than the House. Yeah. And I'm sure, and Ed wouldn't say this probably, but he's probably sick and tired of maybe he has said it. I haven't been following it, but I mean the House is a tainted house now. Very few people are happy with their existence in the House. Yeah,
and the other part about it, what are you giving? He got the most money in his bank.
Yeah.
If he runs and loses, he's still a congressman.
Yeah.
And if he runs and wins, he's one of 100 instead of one of 435, and you're in a majority party in the Senate. Right. So therefore, you get some pretty good assignments.
Right.
And you'll be a 66-year-old freshman senator. And that's the one drawback, is because the Senate is more geared towards seniority than the House is. Although the House is really has some of that element in who gets what. But in the Senate, if you're 66 and going in as a freshman...
Well, the Senate's got much younger now. The average age of the Senate's dropped dramatically because Daniel Inouye died.
Yeah.
He was in there since 1959 when Hawaii was first made a state.
Yeah, he was 88 years old, yeah.
Well, he's almost as old as you, Ed.
Well, he's even older. My time hasn't come yet. But
I was really impressed with his his war service and stuff.
Wonderful record, yeah. They were mistreated by the government. The Japanese Americans, a terrible, terrible indictment of how we treated those people in California and in the western part of the country because they happen to have Japanese parentage. But the one other thing with Eddie Markey is that at one time, that he was going to run for senator once before.
Yeah.
And that was when Paul Tsongas vacated the seat.
Yeah.
And Kerry was in New York, was lieutenant governor, and in Europe, and Eddie announced that he's running, and then people like Mike McGlynn and Mike Barrett from Cambridge and Paliokas, another rep from Woburn, were going to run for his seat in Congress, and lo and behold, when Eddie was must have been tracking the polls, he wasn't doing that well. All of a sudden, he decided he'd rather be a congressman. So anyway, but I think
that was many years ago.
That was
how many years has he been in the House?
It's 30. It's since 1977.
Whoa, that's as long as I've been married.
Well, you're both getting bored with it, I
guess. Excuse me?
No, it's time to make a change.
You know my wife's in Florida.
That's why I'm saying that. That's right. Yeah. But I people think that Brown, is a shoo-in, but I don't think so. I mean, when you think about it, he gets up on television before the election, and they ask him about raising taxes, not for the middle class, and that was when they were talking $250 income. And in some places, like maybe Manhattan, $250 is an unusually high amount of money.
I know.
But in Shreveport, Alabama, or in Lawrence, Mass, $250,000 is pretty good money. So now he's turned around, and I was listening to one of the talk shows today. They were railing against Scott Brown that he's really a rhino.
Oh yeah.
which is a Republican name only, and that they figured they're saying he deserted the Tea Party group.
Well, I mean, I think his most recent votes reflect his intention to run for the Senate.
Yeah,
because
yeah.
you know, he is obviously looking inward to the tone in Massachusetts rather than what's going on in the Republican Party right now. So
we have also a new. What do we got? We got well, I'm looking here at violence in Malden.
well, now that is something that is like pretty much, you know, I mean, we had a shooting the other night, but people, I think people's concern focuses on that, just public safety and the general increase in the number of shootings that we've had in Malden over the last year. I think we've had quite a few shootings in the last year, right?
Yeah, one at the ferry. There was a stabbing on Ferry Street. There was
all within the last year, too.
Yeah, last few months, yeah. And it appears they're unrelated, which would suggest it isn't gang connected. But at the same time, there seems to be an issue of drugs probably being involved. But I think for people to see it on the news or to read about it in the newspaper, it gives them some concern because it's not the way they view Malden as a
Right.
just memory, you know, growing up, and yet there have been these violent issues. And last year there was a concern. I remember this one store got robbed several times, and it was like the people were ready to give it up, and then the city came down and suggested they make reconfigure the way the store laid out and take some of the ads or whatever things they had splashed across the windows, allow more vision into the store. And it seems since then the owner have stayed on, and there hasn't been any kind of an activity of that kind happen at that store since. But in Malden, you have in a relatively short time 4 or 5 instances where people either shot or stabbed. It's not exactly you know, a crime wave, but it certainly suggests that within the city itself things have changed because some of it is so many new people living here that didn't live before, and you don't always know your neighbors, and
Right.
and you don't have the connections to people in the neighborhood that you used to have.
Yeah.
And we're all perhaps guilty of that to some degree. So, but that is one of the you know, it is a big story, and it has been a problem. It will hopefully it won't continue. I recall 3 or 4 years ago there was a surge of fires. In the beginning of the year, and there was a lot of demand for more firefighters and build that other station. And then they tended to, although there were more that year than usual, the ones that occurred when they, for the most part, were the beginning of the year. And then it kind of went back to the normal pace of medical aid calls and small kind of fires that didn't have the impact that the ones in the early part of the year did. So.
Well, let me just over the years since I've lived here, right? It always seems to me, because we go through cycles of, you know, issues, but I always like the idea of beat cops, you know.
Oh.
And I know they have, I think they have one in the downtown area, right?
They do.
But I don't think they have too many more beats.
They do not.
They do not.
They don't have any.
They don't have any.
No.
So I always thought it was fairly successful when they went to that cycle of having beat cops out there. And then there was a period of time when we actually had cops on bikes, right?
You still might have that in the good weather.
I don't think so, but I could be wrong about that.
Okay.
I haven't seen them in quite some time, but
Okay.
I could be wrong.
Maybe motorcycles.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, again, now here's another thing, though, that happened last year. It looks like the final construction of the bike to the sea path, right?
Yes. Yeah.
That's another thing. Is it complete?
I believe it is.
It
At least
is.
that part
At
of it
least through the
affects
Malden part?
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So I'm waiting to see somebody ride on it. I haven't seen anybody.
Steve Winslow out. All right.
I am going to ride that thing because I want to find out where it goes. I have no idea where it goes. So
you know, and we also had some anniversaries this year in Malden. The Malden Junior Ray's 100 years old.
Wow.
And they had a fundraising event at Fenway Park, which, although not Malden, they also were they celebrate the 100th anniversary of the Fenway Park.
Oh wow.
Built in 1912, and they also had the Girl Scouts is 100 years old.
Oh wow.
and we have Girl Scouts in Malden, and Oreo Cookies is 100 years old.
Whoa, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
So that was a lot, and the junior aid is hopefully the audience will recognize the name there. And it used to be prominently involved with the Malden Hospital, and now they're still active doing fundraising and doing the kind of things in the community that get appreciated, and reaching out to a lot of different people over the course of a year or 2 years as they make their way along and raise money for worthy causes. So that's that. And we have a new sports arena at the not arena exactly, a new sports area down at the Mystic Valley Charter School on Eastern Avenue.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Very nice appearing.
But I can't use it, right?
Well, no, but you can use Pearl Street Stadium.
I can use what?
There's a walk track around Pearl Street Stadium. You can use that. There's one there that's just been completed up at Pine Banks. You can use that. But
oh, okay.
If you wanted to use the one at the charter school, you probably have to pay a toll. which brings me to another. Getting back maybe to digress a little bit. There's some kind of a contentious efforts going on within the community between the mayor's office and the city councilor from Ward 6, Neil Kinnan, who is the chairman of the Mystic Valley Regional Schools. And the mayor has filed a complaint with the Ethics Commission about Neil being in conflict of interest, wearing two hats, the city councilor and charter school interest, as it were. And
who defines who in the city would who makes the official designation as to whether it's a conflict or not?
Well,
is there some sort of a legal opinion that's rendered?
Well, it's going to happen. The mayor filed a complaint with the Ethics Commission, with the state office.
Right.
They adjudicate those kinds of situations.
Yeah.
If someone at a local level has some concerns about it, they could obviously go to the city attorney's legal staff and ask them for a ruling. And
nobody's done that?
Well, unfortunately, there's gray areas, but I'm going to say Neil's kind of an interesting counselor, and I think from a political perspective, I don't think he's suffering much because of the controversy. On the other hand, the part of it that if your kids were in charter school, you're looking for the best for them, and what is surface is
so you overlook legality.
Well, no. You look at it from a different you look at it from a different perspective. But there's also an issue going on. The city's looking at the Boston Steel property, which is on the other corner from this field, and they're thinking about moving the DPW and some support offices down to that location. But Neil's filing a complaint argued that the mayor should have come to the city council before he started negotiating that proposition with the Boston Steel. But
why?
Well, that's a good question. The mayor said he didn't have to. Neil said the council is on checks and balances.
Well, I mean, I would think the mayor, if he can talk, why can't he talk?
You mean with the Boston Steel?
Yeah.
Well, he can't. He actually,
I mean, he would. I would think that he'd have to bring, if he got into any sort of agreement, or is even thinking of an agreement, he would then have to go to the council.
Well, he did. He did that. But he did it after he kind of had a tentative agreement as far as the sale and purchase of that property, and then you go out and do a request for proposal, which is a public advertising for people who are interested in soliciting a bid for a relocating the DPW and the other parts of the city government will be housed together if it works out. But it's like in some ways you say, well, how can you go out with an RFP, which is a request for a proposal, and encourage other people to take the time to put together a proposal when you've already said you've gone to somebody and you've worked the deal out with them if everything falls in place. But what's kind of interesting, and this is what I want to bring up, when Neil was a chairperson of the Mystic Valley Charter School, as he has been, when the city was selling the Maplewood School to the charter school, the mayor did this. The former mayor did the same thing.
Yeah.
He went to charter school, or they went to him, they negotiated a deal, then the mayor came to the city council and says, this is what I've done.
Yeah.
I've got a tentative agreement.
Yeah.
The proposal that was negotiated by the mayor and the school was ultimately the proposal that was voted on and approved by the council. So in that instant, it was the same scenario as Neil has criticized the mayor for now, because he doesn't want probably that DPW yard to be at Boston Steel, because that will take away maybe something from the charter schools with the track school. And I think...
Well, how many open properties do we have that are significant enough to support the DPW yard?
Well, that is another issue, but in fairness to the Mystic Valley, I can understand why they would rather not have it. I think if you ask the people in Foster Street, for the most part, they wouldn't want it either. And I think there's some merit to that, because if you think about it, the school opens in the morning when the people from the DPW go to work. Sometimes the school gets out close to the time that they'll be going back with the vehicles, and if you have a situation where...
But I have a feeling that property is large enough to where they could put the entrance on the other side.
Other side?
Well, I mean, I don't know the exact dimensions of that property, but I'm assuming that it's fairly significant, right?
It is.
How many acres?
2. I think it's 2.
I mean, really, 2 acres?
Yeah.
Okay. But, I mean, you wouldn't have to have the entrance or the activity on the side where the school is, right?
No, but what you do, and that's what I always had a little bit of concerns when they were talking about putting the fire station down Eastern Avenue. I mean, sometimes in the morning and in the afternoons, late in the afternoon, traffic is almost at a standstill, and so.
Well, true.
And so there could be some argument. Say, well, look, if you put the facility there, you may be endangering the lives of the kids crossing the street. I mean, it cuts both ways. But part of the dilemma is that there's very few choices around, right, and therefore your options are limited. But
weren't they talking one time of down by Oak Grove, across the street from Oak Grove? Isn't there some manufacturing in there?
There is.
Wasn't there a parcel in there that could be used? I thought there was talk that was going to be the DPW yard at one time.
I don't recall that, but they've looked at, they've thought about doing it in some other locations, and you always come back to I suppose one of the advantages of this Boston Steel property is it's already got bays there, because they service.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, and they could retrofit it.
That's a nice building. Actually.
It is. But again, when you look at the location, it's got some pluses and some minuses. But I think Neil's been a little inconsistent. I mean, what he thought was okay when the charter schools were buying the Maplewood School, now all of a sudden it's not the same. And the other thing is that when the city sold that property to the charter school, they didn't take into consideration that the weather vane, which is a historical significance to the city, which was in that fire station, was part of the package deal. That supposedly has values, depending who you speak to, anywhere from $10,000 to $50,000, and the city didn't get any of them because they allowed the weather vane to stay there when the property went. And I, at that time, I remember calling a couple of people affiliated with the fire department, reminding them about it. And of course, it wasn't their responsibility; it was the mayor's office required to do the negotiations. So they allowed that to happen, and
you can't take the weather vane by eminent domain.
No, you see, it's like I think it's basically like a chandelier.
You take land, why can't you take a weather vane?
It's like a chandelier. Well, because what they did was they took it down and hid it, kind of. It's out of sight. So the last I heard, it was secreted in one of their rental properties in the Maplewood area, But anyway, again, it seems to me Neil has some issues that as a city councilor, he would have fought those on a different level, I think, with his tenacious personality if he were not with the charter school. So I think in some instances he has been in conflict. It'll be interesting to see how the ruling comes down and what happens when it does, since he's not personally benefiting from it financially. I don't know what they're going to do much about it. But between the position he's taken this time with the charter school versus what he did before when they were buying the property is a little inconsistent. But time will show.
I just don't think there should be gray areas. And if there are gray areas, then you should get a legal opinion, and that should be from a legal counsel right here in Malden.
But
you know, I mean, when there's any question, they should have a ruling.
Well,
and then if that ruling can be challenged, and then taken to the state. But you shouldn't allow a gray area to exist, right?
Well, but then what you need something to happen like what the mayor did, file a complaint. Until that happened, there's no reason for them to respond.
But he filed it with the state, so what gets the local opinion generated?
Well, the state would have the final say anyway, so that would make some sense. Yeah. So anyway, those are some of the issues that affected Malden, and you have some there, I think, that we haven't talked about yet, Bill, right?
Well, there were some educators apparently during the last year that we're going to miss, and there's a Mr. Pham, Paul Familietti,
yes,
who
very tragic death.
It was a tragic death during the year, and a lot of students I know felt badly of his passing, and also Diane Dinglow early in the year passed.
Former principal of Chevron.
Former principal of Chevron, and I know there's a lot of Chevron people out there that have missed her. We've had talk of our recycling issues during the year. We've had a lot of
like the bags,
right?
What do you think about the bags?
I'm fine with the way it is, but I do think that other communities are getting more flexible with their plans. With I know, like in Marshfield, they allow at least one canister or before you're charged, and I think it could be a little bit more flexible.
Well, one of the things that, and I've spoken on this a number of occasions in the past, was those other programs are focused on recycling. And the more you recycle, obviously the less that goes in the landfills, and therefore the less it costs the community to get rid of their rubbish.
Yeah.
When Malden implemented the trash program they currently have, the primary purpose of the trash program, even though they made it sound like a recycling effort, it was really to raise money. It was an indirect tax, and I think that's what angered the people, is that they felt they were being taxed without an opportunity to pass on it. And it was true, because and the interesting thing is they've never raised as much money from the sale of bags as they anticipated.
Right.
But they have saved more money than they expected on the trash.
Oh, really?
The landfill costs have skyrocketed. And in the meantime, the amount of tonnage that has gone into the landfill has been reduced. So where the saving has really been affected is more with the saving on the trash than it is on the bags.
Oh, okay.
But
I think there's a lot of surrounding communities, because people always point to like either Everett, the way Everett does it. There's got to be some best practices that can be looked at and instilled into the current program. And you just have to go to the surrounding communities and start picking up some of the ideas that are actually working out there and just bringing it into the program.
Well, but
I don't think you have to throw the program out, but I do think that a modification should be made.
Well, on the other hand, then you're at that point. What do you do with your lost revenue? And I mean, I think
I'm not suggesting losing revenue, but because you're saying it's basically, instead of, as you just described, the whole program was initially put in to raise dough. But if we just change the focus, I say, okay, that's what it was initially, but let's change it now to be on the recycling amount, of which you just admitted is where we're really making the money, in the savings of the recycling, in the reduction of the tonnage, right?
Well, except there's a diminishing effect. There's only so much recycling you could do, and for those people that don't fully implement it and their options, that means they either take it out of the city and dump it someplace else, or they pay for the bags.
Right.
So, if you increase the recycling, you reduce the number of bags that would be sold, and therefore that would be reduced in revenue.
So you're telling me there's no hope?
Oh, there is. As a matter of fact, I think it's very likely the city may change the program currently in place, but they're not going to be doing it and lose revenue when this year when the city is facing maybe a shortfall from the state.
Okay, and let's not forget in sports, the girls' Malden softball team had a very successful year this year.
They sure did. Went to the state finals.
As well as the Malden gymnastics team that had good fortune and good luck this year. So
GBL.
Actually, the Malden High football team had a pretty good year.
They won 3 games.
3 games? Well, they beat Medford, didn't they?
Well, that's like the whole season.
That was big to me. I thought that was
Medford,
great.
Medford fired their coach in the middle of the year.
Yeah.
I think Medford maybe won. If they won 2 games, they won a lot. I think maybe they won 1 game.
I thought, well, relatively speaking, I thought Malden football had a pretty good year.
That's like being the richest person in welfare when you.
Well, I don't know. I thought it was pretty good.
but Medford has not had a good football team for a long time. It's hard to figure out why. Malden hasn't done that well either.
I know.
They've won a few games.
Well, I mean, I've always sneakingly suspicioned that anybody that was any good would go to Everett because they want to be on a winning team.
Well,
so, you know, I mean, I don't know exactly how that works, but I mean, obviously Everett has powerhouse teams year in and year out.
They do.
And I think it's all by magic unless people go there to play on their team.
Well, they have a very strong community support group, business people, right. The Everett E Club, and they probably, maybe if you check them out, and not being envious really, but check them out, maybe there's a few of those students that end up in the Everett school system may not really be Everett residents, other than the fact they are because they're good football players. So, but
well, I have a tendency. I mean, you know, because why is it that neighboring towns aren't even close to being in the same league with these people? And you know, you always wonder what the reasons are.
Yeah, well,
good coaching, you think?
Well, coaching should be about 5% of the talent. So I mean, the rest of it is up to the players, and they get the players, but they always had big kids anyway. They a lot of pasta over there. But well, listen, we're coming. The Patriots got a Super Bowl run.
Yeah, they have a good shot at it.
I don't think so. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. And the Red Sox, I don't think look good at all. But they're going to spring training in February, and they'll be in Florida.
Well, now the Red Sox they've completely resurfaced their team, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
they have. But as was noted in the Globe Sports page today, their weakness last year was showed up dramatically in the last half of the year, particularly from August on.
Now, I'm wondering, how do we gracefully exit this program?
Well, we do it by let me talk. They haven't improved with the pitching. But listen, we're at the end of the show, the beginning of a new year and the end of an old year, and I appreciate you coming on, Bill.
Oh, okay.
And for those of you that didn't see the whole show, we're on Saturday and Sunday this coming week. And thanks for the calls that you didn't make.
Right. You saved us a lot of trouble that we didn't have to answer the phone.
That's right. You might have found out how little we know, but it's first Wednesday of the month at 7 o'clock. We'll see you back.
Maybe our opinion was so good that they didn't need to call in.
No, we gave them all the information they needed to know.
We've communicated perfectly.
Yeah. Thank you, Rosemary.
All right. Thank you.
Get out of the dock and into the zone.